What if I told you that the war in Ukraine could end, not with a treaty signed in a grand palace, but with a whisper in a hallway in Washington? What if I told you that right now, as you watch this, there is a very real, very credible scenario where Vladimir Putin wins his war without ever having to take Kyiv? A scenario where Ukraine doesn't get conquered, it just runs out of bullets, runs out of air defense, runs out of hope, and the West, we just let it happen. That is not a movie plot. That is a live, unfolding contingency plan inside the Kremlin. And it is being helped along day by day by a political decision we are making right now. Tonight, we're going to walk through how that slow surrender would actually happen, step by step. Because if we want to understand what's at stake, we need to stop watching the front lines and start watching the clock. Let's start with a number: 6. For 6 months, a $60 billion aid package for Ukraine sat frozen in the United States Congress. 6 months of debate, 6 months of delay, 6 months of political theater. And for Vladimir Putin, every single one of those months was a gift of time. Because time is the one resource Russia has more of than Ukraine, and time is the weapon Russia is using to win this war. For 6 months, we have been loading that weapon for them. Let me show you what that gift looks like. Not in Moscow, but on the ground, in the frozen mud of eastern Ukraine. On the front lines, especially around places like Chasiv Yar, the story Ukrainian commanders have been screaming for months is the same. They are being outgunned by a factor of 5 to 1. Western intelligence assessments have been clear. Russia is firing 10,000 artillery shells a day. Ukraine at times can only fire back 2,000. Think about that. For every 5 shells Russia rains down on a Ukrainian position, a Ukrainian soldier can only fire 1 back. That is not a fight, that is a slow, grinding demolition. And the reason for that shell shortage is not because our factories can't make them. It's because the political decision to send them was stuck for 6 months. So, why does this matter so much? Because this isn't just about one battle. Russia's entire strategy is to turn this into a war of industrial and human endurance. They know they can't outthink the Ukrainian military, so they are trying to outlast them, outlast their ammo, outlast their air defense, and most importantly, outlast our political will. This is the second front of the war. It's not fought with tanks. It's fought with arguments in Washington, with election campaigns in Europe, with pro-Kremlin propaganda that whispers, "Are you tired of this yet? Isn't it expensive? Shouldn't this be over?" And when we delay aid for 6 months, we are not being neutral. We are answering yes. The artillery problem is a catastrophe. But the air defense problem is an extinction-level event. Ukraine's cities are being bombarded by a storm of missiles and drones. Their only protection is a patchwork of Soviet-era systems and precious Western batteries like the Patriot. The problem? Every interceptor they fire costs millions, takes months to replace, and there is a finite number in the entire world. Ukrainian leaders have been begging. We are running out of air defense missiles. We saw the consequences when Russia began targeting Ukraine's power grid again. Hundreds of missiles and drones at a time. Some got through, because Ukraine can't shoot everything down. Nobody can. Now, fast forward. What if, by this winter, Ukraine's air defense stockpiles finally dip below the red line? What if they have to make a choice? Do we defend Kyiv or Kharkiv? Do we shoot down the drone over the power plant or the one over the apartment building? We have already seen them forced into those impossible calculations. And if Western aid dries up, that air defense umbrella doesn't just get thin, it tears. And when it tears, Russia doesn't need to conquer every inch of Ukraine. It just needs to make the country unlivable. Destroy the power grid again and again. Hit water facilities, drive millions more refugees into Europe. Make rebuilding seem hopeless. So ask yourself, what if the lights go out in much of Ukraine for good? And what if, at that exact moment, Western politicians turn to their voters and say, "We tried, we spent billions, it didn't work, time to move on"? That is the precise moment Putin is working toward. He calls it strategic patience. We call it the slow surrender. And this is where the nightmare on the ground connects directly to the political war being waged against us. Because for Putin's plan to work, he needs to break the West at home. And look at the landscape. In the United States, we have seen with our own eyes how aid can be stalled by a single person's political grievance. We have seen it nearly die. In Europe, pro-Russian and Ukraine fatigue parties are gaining ground, campaigning on the very narrative Putin wants, that this is too expensive, that Ukraine is corrupt, that it's time for peace. So imagine the perfect storm he is waiting for. Imagine this winter, Russia. Ukraine's lights are flickering because its air defense is gone. Another major Ukrainian city is on the verge of falling because of the shell shortage, and right then, an election happens. In America, in a key European country. And a new leader comes to power on a platform of, "I told you so, it's time to cut our losses." Putin doesn't need to win on the battlefield if he can make us lose our nerve. He doesn't need a military victory if he can engineer a political one in our own capitals. He just needs us to give up. So let's say it happens. Let's say we push Ukraine to negotiate from a position of weakness. What does that peace look like? Let's be clear. It means Russia keeps Crimea. It keeps the Donbas. It keeps all the land it has murdered and deported its way into possessing. It means the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant for Putin for war crimes gets filed away and forgotten. It means we look the other way while a nuclear power redraws the map of Europe by force, and we tell the world, aggression works, just be patient, just outlast them. Do we really think China doesn't notice that when it looks at Taiwan? Do we think other aggressive regimes don't notice that when they look at their neighbors? This isn't a Ukraine problem. This is a precedent. This is the new world order. A world where might makes right. That is not peace. That is a roadmap for the next war, and the next, and the next. So when you hear a politician say, "We've done enough," I want you to hear what they're really saying. They're saying, "I am comfortable with the scenario where Ukraine's air defense fails." When you hear, "Where is the end game?" I want you to hear, "I am willing to accept a peace that rewards a war criminal and invites the next war." This outcome is not inevitable. It is a choice. The only thing standing between that nightmare and a different future is whether we recognize this slow surrender for what it is, and whether we decide right now that defending a country that was invaded and defending the basic idea that borders cannot be changed by force is worth the cost. Because if it isn't, then we should be honest with ourselves. We are not just giving up on Ukraine. We are giving up on the very idea that small countries have a right to exist if a bigger neighbor decides they shouldn't. And if we do that, what happens when it's not Ukraine next time? We are letting the world become a much more dangerous place,